The origins of the White Huns, or Hephthalites, can be traced to the vast steppes of Central Asia, spanning regions of modern-day Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan. Emerging around the 4th century CE, they were part of a broader milieu of nomadic pastoralist societies, whose livelihoods depended on seasonal migration, horse breeding, and herd management. Archaeological evidence, including burial mounds, horse trappings, and weaponry, indicates a society organized around mobility and martial skill. Linguistic and numismatic analysis suggests that the White Huns shared affinities with other Eurasian Hunnic groups, though they maintained distinct cultural markers that set them apart from contemporaneous Iranian and Turkic peoples. Their nomadic lifestyle, shaped by the steppe environment, necessitated a social structure capable of swift decision-making and collective coordination, particularly during migration and conflict. Over the following centuries, these adaptive traits facilitated the transformation of loosely organized tribes into a formidable confederation. Understanding this geographical and cultural foundation is essential for appreciating how the Huns later expanded into the Iranian plateau and northern India. Within these steppe communities, early White Hun society coalesced into tribal confederations, consolidating under leaders who balanced martial authority with clan consensus. Sources from Chinese chronicles and Persian accounts describe a pattern of seasonal alliances, intermarriage among clans, and temporary military coalitions. These confederations enabled the Huns to mobilize large numbers of cavalry and infantry for raids and defense, demonstrating an organizational sophistication beyond simple tribal arrangements. By retaining customary governance mechanisms, while also learning from neighboring sedentary states, the Huns established a system that allowed them to maintain cohesion across extensive territories. Archaeological findings, including fortified encampments and ritual sites, reveal the presence of social hierarchy, suggesting that leadership was recognized both for military competence and lineage. These early structures were instrumental in transforming the Huns from loosely affiliated nomads into a collective capable of sustained expansion. The confederation model would later underpin their ability to project power across multiple regions, linking social cohesion directly to strategic capacity. The White Huns' interactions with neighboring powers further shaped their development, exposing them to the administrative, military, and economic practices of sedentary states. Contacts with the Sassanid Empire, Kushan remnants, and Sogdian city-states provided both opportunities and challenges. Trade networks allowed the Huns to acquire goods, technologies, and cultural knowledge, while military confrontations demonstrated the limitations and strengths of their nomadic warfare. Chinese chronicles, particularly the Wei Shu, document Hunnic diplomacy and raids, revealing a pattern of negotiation alongside conflict. By integrating aspects of governance, tribute collection, and siege techniques observed from these interactions, the Huns began to adopt pragmatic administrative practices without abandoning their nomadic flexibility. This adaptability illustrates how a mobile society could absorb and repurpose the innovations of more established civilizations. These early engagements with neighboring empires prepared the Huns for the large-scale invasions and empire building that characterized their expansion into South Asia and the Iranian plateau. By the 5th century, the White Huns emerged as a significant regional power, capable of challenging both sedentary states and rival nomadic groups. Leaders such as Grumbates and, later, Toramana consolidated military and political authority, creating hierarchical structures that facilitated strategic coordination over long distances. The Huns' military effectiveness derived from their mobility, archery, and psychological tactics, including surprise attacks and feigned retreats. Archaeological evidence from fortified sites indicates a growing capacity for sustained occupation of strategic locations, enabling the Huns to control trade routes and regional resources. These developments marked the transition from seasonal raiding to organized conquest, demonstrating the Huns' evolution from regional tribes to an emergent empire. Their ascent reshaped the balance of power in Central Asia and laid the groundwork for incursions into northern India and Persia, illustrating the interplay between mobility, organization, and military innovation. The incursion of the White Huns into northern India in the late 5th and early 6th centuries represented a critical phase in their expansion. Following the Kabul Valley and the Punjab, the Huns penetrated the Gangetic Plains, confronting the Gupta Empire during a period of political and economic vulnerability. Inscriptions and coinage reveal the establishment of Hunnic authority in strategic urban centers, often through military garrisons and tribute arrangements. Leaders like Toramana implemented both coercive and integrative policies, leveraging local elites to manage taxation, maintain order, and facilitate economic activity. Archaeological evidence demonstrates that the Huns engaged with local artisans, adopted regional administrative practices, and participated in trade networks, reflecting a capacity for cultural and political adaptation. The invasions had significant consequences, contributing to the decline of Gupta authority, disrupting long-established urban centers, and altering regional power structures. Their actions in India illustrate the broader principle of how mobile, militarily adept groups could reshape sedentary civilizations through both force and administration. Concurrently, the White Huns conducted campaigns in Persia, challenging the Sassanid Empire during the reign of Peroz I. Contemporary sources, including Persian chronicles, describe incursions into Khorasan and northeastern Iranian territories, which temporarily destabilized Sassanid control. The Huns' military pressure prompted the Sassanids to adapt, leading to reforms in defense, fortification, and military organization. At times, the Huns engaged in negotiations and received tribute, demonstrating a sophisticated approach to power projection that combined aggression with diplomacy. These interactions illustrate the Huns' dual role as both destabilizers and political actors, capable of influencing imperial strategies beyond their immediate territories. Their campaigns in Persia reinforced the importance of strategic flexibility, combining mobility with opportunistic diplomacy, and set a pattern for subsequent interactions with neighboring powers. By integrating these experiences, tribal consolidation, administrative adaptation, cultural engagement, and military innovation, the White Huns established the foundation for a multi-regional empire. Their origins in the steppes shaped a society optimized for mobility, rapid coordination, and strategic opportunism. Tribal alliances and early confederations provided the structural framework necessary for large-scale expansion, while interactions with neighboring civilizations imparted critical lessons in governance, diplomacy, and cultural negotiation. Military campaigns in India and Persia demonstrated the practical application of these capabilities, illustrating the interplay between mobility, strategic planning, and administrative foresight. This initial phase of White Hun history, rooted in the steppes and shaped by early expansion, laid the groundwork for subsequent consolidation, governance, and cultural influence that would define their imperial trajectory over the next century. The consolidation of White Hun power in Central Asia during the 4th and 5th centuries represented a pivotal phase in their transformation from fragmented nomadic clans into a cohesive imperial force. Archaeological evidence indicates that the Huns began establishing semi-permanent encampments and fortified sites in strategic regions, such as the steppes of present-day Uzbekistan and Afghanistan. These sites function not only as military strongholds, but also as administrative hubs that allowed the coordination of seasonal migrations, tribute collection, and resource management. Numismatic analysis of Hunnic coinage reveals that they began asserting sovereign authority, adopting symbols of rulership, while integrating local motifs to communicate legitimacy across culturally diverse territories. This development marked a significant departure from purely tribal organization, illustrating an adaptive strategy that combined traditional nomadic mobility with emergent state structures. By centralizing decision-making and military planning, the White Huns enhanced their capacity to project power over increasingly vast regions, a prerequisite for the invasions and territorial expansions that would define the early 6th century. The White Huns' consolidation was facilitated by the emergence of strong leadership under figures such as Grumbates and later Toramana. Contemporary Chinese, Persian, and Indian sources emphasize the importance of personal authority in maintaining cohesion among disparate clans. Leadership was typically grounded in martial prowess, lineage, and the capacity to negotiate alliances, both within the confederation and with neighboring states. Archaeological findings, including burial practices that denote rank and material wealth, corroborate textual evidence of hierarchical structures. The establishment of clear lines of authority allowed for coordinated military campaigns and the efficient administration of conquered territories. These leadership structures were critical in transforming episodic raiding parties into sustained campaigns capable of destabilizing established empires. Furthermore, they allowed the Huns to adapt tribal decision-making processes to a broader imperial context, blending consensus-based governance with centralized command. Economic and trade considerations also played a significant role in the Huns' consolidation. Situated along key routes connecting the Eurasian steppes, Persia, and northern India, the White Huns leveraged control of trade networks to support military campaigns and administrative infrastructure. Archaeological evidence, including imported goods, coin hoards, and remnants of caravanserais, demonstrates active engagement with regional trade systems. The Huns' ability to tax or exact tribute from settled populations provided both wealth and political leverage, reinforcing the authority of central leadership. Numismatic studies reveal bilingual inscriptions on coins issued in conquered territories, reflecting both integration with local economic practices and assertion of imperial identity. By combining military prowess with economic oversight, the Huns created a durable framework for sustaining expansion while maintaining mobility, a dual strategy that proved essential for the administration of diverse regions. Social and cultural adaptation was another key aspect of consolidation. The White Huns interacted extensively with the Sassanid Empire, Sogdian merchants, and the remnants of Kushan and Gupta polities. These encounters facilitated the adoption of administrative, religious, and technological practices without compromising nomadic identity. Inscriptions, coins, and art from this period reflect a blending of Hunnic, Iranian, and South Asian motifs, suggesting a pragmatic approach to governance and cultural engagement. Religious practices also demonstrate adaptation, with shamanistic traditions coexisting alongside Buddhism, Hinduism, and Zoroastrianism in controlled territories. This cultural flexibility allowed the Huns to stabilize their dominions, integrating local elites and populations into a governance system that was both functional and legitimized. The fusion of mobility, administrative structure, and cultural negotiation exemplified the sophistication of Hunnic consolidation. Military organization during this period evolved to meet the demands of sustained territorial control. The White Huns refined cavalry tactics, incorporating intelligence gathering, strategic raids, and rapid mobilization to maintain both internal cohesion and external pressure. Archaeological evidence, including weapon caches, horse equipment, and fortification remnants, underscores the significance of mobility and logistical planning in Hunnic campaigns. Leadership directed the integration of local infantry units from conquered regions, combining nomadic and sedentary martial practices. The ability to synchronize operations across long distances while maintaining flexibility gave the Huns a tactical advantage over larger but slower empires. These innovations highlight the interdependence of military strategy, administrative oversight, and political authority in consolidating the White Huns' emerging empire. By the end of this phase, the White Huns had transformed from scattered pastoralist clans into a coherent, multi-regional confederation with the capacity for sustained conquest, governance, and economic integration. The consolidation phase established enduring mechanisms of leadership, administration, and cultural negotiation that underpinned their later territorial expansion into northern India and Persia. It also laid the groundwork for the establishment of semi-permanent administrative centers, tribute networks, and military garrisons that would define the structure of the Hunnic state. This combination of mobility, administrative sophistication, and strategic adaptation allowed the Huns to maintain dominance over diverse populations while preparing the foundation for the empire's expansion under Toramana and Mihirakula. The successes of consolidation directly facilitated the Huns' ability to engage in large-scale campaigns and interact diplomatically with neighboring empires, bridging the steppe origins of their society with the imperial ambitions that would follow. The consolidation of the White Huns thus represents a critical juncture in their history, demonstrating the deliberate evolution from tribal organization to a structured imperial force. Leadership, military innovation, economic integration, and cultural adaptation collectively strengthened the Huns' capacity for sustained influence. This phase set the stage for their expansion into the fertile plains of northern India and the complex political landscapes of Persia and Central Asia. By establishing centralized command, integrating local elites, and adapting to diverse cultural contexts, the White Huns exemplified how a nomadic society could construct the institutional foundations of an empire. The lessons of this period, particularly in leadership and administration, would resonate throughout the subsequent expansion, military campaigns, and governance strategies that define the White Huns' historical trajectory. The emergence of structured governance among the White Huns marked a pivotal transformation in their evolution from a mobile confederation to a territorial power capable of administering diverse populations. By the early 6th century, leaders such as Toramana and Mihirakula had begun consolidating authority over vast regions spanning northern India, Afghanistan, and parts of Central Asia. Archaeological and numismatic evidence indicates that the Huns established semi-permanent administrative centers in strategic locations such as the Kabul Valley, Punjab, and the northwestern Gangetic Plains. These centers functioned as hubs for taxation, legal oversight, and military coordination, reflecting an adaptive strategy that combined nomadic mobility with the requirements of territorial administration. Coinage from this period, often featuring bilingual inscriptions and local motifs alongside Hunnic symbols, demonstrates both political assertion and cultural integration, signaling the Huns' emerging role as legitimate rulers in the eyes of their subjects. The organizational structure of the White Huns relied heavily on a balance between centralized authority and local autonomy. Tribal chiefs retained significant influence within their clans, particularly in matters of military mobilization, while regional governors, often drawn from local elites, managed civic administration and tribute collection. Inscriptions from northern India reveal the retention of Gupta-era bureaucrats and tax officials, suggesting that the Huns understood the value of continuity in governance to maintain stability. These administrative arrangements allowed the empire to function efficiently despite its diverse geography and population. The dual system, nomadic leadership overseeing a network of sedentary administrators, enabled the White Huns to project authority across both steppe and urban regions, providing the institutional foundation necessary for sustained territorial control and economic management. The Huns' fiscal policies were instrumental in consolidating their governance. Tribute collection, taxation of urban centers, and control over trade routes provided the financial resources needed to sustain military campaigns and administrative operations. Numismatic studies reveal coins minted in conquered territories that not only facilitated local commerce, but also reinforced the legitimacy of Hunnic rulers. Tribute arrangements were often negotiated with local kings and landholders, blending coercion with diplomacy. This pragmatic approach allowed the Huns to extract resources without provoking widespread rebellion, ensuring both political and economic stability. The combination of military dominance and effective fiscal management illustrates how governance and economic strategy were mutually reinforcing in maintaining imperial authority. Legal and judicial frameworks under Hunnic rule combined customary tribal law with inherited practices from conquered regions. Evidence from inscriptions and legal codes indicates that the Huns respected local traditions while asserting their authority in matters of dispute resolution, property rights, and criminal justice. By allowing local legal practices to coexist with overarching Hunnic oversight, the empire mitigated resistance and fostered administrative continuity. This approach also reinforced the perception of legitimacy, as local populations could continue established practices under new rulers. The synthesis of customary and formal legal systems reflects the Huns' capacity for adaptation, demonstrating that governance was as much about cultural negotiation as it was about military authority. Military organization remained central to governance, as the Huns relied on a mobile and disciplined cavalry to enforce authority, suppress rebellion, and expand territorial control. Regional commanders, often drawn from clan elites, coordinated with central leadership to ensure rapid deployment across vast distances. Archaeological evidence of fortified settlements and military encampments indicates careful strategic planning, enabling the Huns to sustain both defensive and offensive operations. Integration of local infantry and logistical support from conquered regions allowed the empire to maintain operational efficiency. This military administrative integration exemplifies the Huns' ability to balance mobility, coercion, and bureaucratic oversight, reinforcing governance across a geographically and culturally diverse empire. The White Huns also demonstrated strategic adaptability in their approach to local elites and populations. By incorporating local rulers into the administrative hierarchy, granting limited autonomy, and preserving cultural practices, they mitigated the disruptive effects of conquest. Evidence from inscriptions, coinage, and temple patronage suggests that Hunnic rulers actively engaged with local religious and cultural institutions, using these interactions to legitimize authority. This approach reinforced loyalty and facilitated smoother governance across the empire, highlighting a sophisticated understanding of political integration. The Huns' ability to combine coercive power with pragmatic accommodation illustrates the centrality of governance to sustaining empire. The development of administrative centers, fiscal mechanisms, legal systems, and military organization under the White Huns created a framework capable of supporting long-term control over conquered territories. Semi-permanent settlements allowed the coordination of seasonal nomadic movements with the demands of urban governance, demonstrating a hybrid model that balanced flexibility with institutional stability. These governance structures were critical in enabling the Huns to manage multi-regional populations, extract resources effectively, and maintain military readiness. By blending nomadic traditions with sedentary administrative practices, the White Huns established a model of governance that facilitated both territorial expansion and cultural integration. The consolidation of Hunnic administration ultimately provided the structural foundation for the empire's broader societal and cultural developments. Effective governance ensured the collection of resources, coordination of military campaigns, and integration of diverse populations, creating conditions for economic growth, cultural exchange, and the flourishing of art and religious practices. By establishing centralized oversight while respecting local customs, the Huns created a durable system that supported their peak territorial expansion and influence across Central Asia and northern India. This phase of governance demonstrates the critical link between political organization, military strategy, and societal stability, forming the basis for the White Huns' cultural and military achievements in subsequent periods. The administrative evolution of the White Huns illustrates the broader principle that nomadic societies could construct complex bureaucratic and legal frameworks to govern sedentary populations. Leadership, fiscal policy, legal adaptation, and military integration collectively enabled the Huns to maintain authority across diverse and expansive territories. This period of structured governance not only consolidated prior conquests, but also facilitated the Huns' capacity for further expansion, cultural engagement, and influence over neighboring empires. By establishing mechanisms for administration, taxation, and legal oversight, the White Huns bridged their nomadic origins with the demands of empire, laying the groundwork for subsequent chapters on culture, military campaigns, and territorial dominance. The cultural development of the White Huns during their expansion into Central Asia and northern India reflects a complex process of adaptation, synthesis, and influence. Despite their origins as nomadic pastoralists, the Huns engaged with the diverse societies they encountered, assimilating administrative practices, religious traditions, and artistic motifs from settled civilizations. Archaeological evidence, including coins, inscriptions, and fortified settlements, demonstrates an awareness of local cultures and an ability to integrate these elements into their own evolving identity. Numismatic studies reveal that Hunnic coinage incorporated both traditional steppe imagery and symbols associated with the Gupta and Sassanid empires, suggesting a deliberate effort to communicate legitimacy and authority across culturally diverse populations. This blending of visual and administrative culture reflects the Huns' capacity to operate within complex social environments while maintaining a cohesive political identity. Religious engagement was a central aspect of Hunnic cultural adaptation. While shamanistic traditions persisted among the nomadic population, interactions with Buddhist, Hindu, and Zoroastrian communities influenced Hunnic practices and patronage. Inscriptions and archaeological findings, including the remains of temples and monasteries in northern India, indicate that Hunnic rulers, such as Toramana and Mihirakula, participated in religious endowments, though the degree of support varied across regions. These actions were not merely ceremonial. They provided a mechanism for legitimizing authority among local populations and integrating conquered elites into the administrative framework. By balancing respect for local religious practices with their own cultural traditions, the Huns established a model of governance that encouraged cooperation and minimized resistance, highlighting the role of religion as both a political and cultural instrument. Artistic expression under Hunnic influence illustrates the blending of steppe and sedentary motifs. Sculptural and architectural remnants from the period show a synthesis of Hunnic, Gupta, and Sassanid elements, particularly in decorative reliefs, coin designs, and ceremonial structures. The use of stylistic motifs, such as equestrian imagery and geometric patterns, reflects both traditional nomadic symbolism and the influence of urban artistic centers. Archaeological analysis of burial sites, fortifications, and urban structures further demonstrates the Huns' engagement with material culture, adapting construction techniques to local environmental and social contexts. These cultural interactions not only reinforced political authority, but also facilitated cross-cultural exchange, contributing to the broader diffusion of artistic and technological practices across Central Asia and northern India. Language and literacy played a significant role in cultural integration. The Huns utilized local scripts and inscriptions to communicate decrees, issue coinage, and record administrative actions. Bilingual inscriptions on coins and monuments indicate a deliberate strategy to reach multiple audiences, ensuring recognition by both nomadic and sedentary populations. The adoption of local linguistic conventions demonstrates the Huns' pragmatic approach to governance, highlighting an understanding that effective cultural integration required communication beyond military dominance. This linguistic adaptation also facilitated trade, legal administration, and religious engagement, reinforcing the empire's cohesion and operational efficiency across diverse territories. Trade and economic networks were integral to cultural development, connecting Hunnic territories with broader Eurasian commerce. The Huns controlled strategic points along trade routes linking Central Asia, Persia, and northern India, enabling the movement of horses, textiles, metals, and luxury goods. Archaeological evidence of caravanserais, coin hoards, and trade-related infrastructure underscores the Huns' role in sustaining and protecting these economic networks. Participation in commerce not only provided wealth to support administrative and military structures, but also facilitated cultural transmission, allowing artistic, religious, and technological influences to circulate across the empire. This economic integration reinforced political authority, demonstrating the interdependence of trade, culture, and governance in sustaining Hunnic influence. Social organization under the Huns was marked by both continuity and adaptation. Tribal structures remained central to decision-making and military coordination, but the incorporation of local elites and bureaucrats allowed the administration of settled populations. Inscriptions and archaeological findings suggest that Hunnic rulers negotiated with landholders, merchants, and religious leaders to maintain social stability. This integration of diverse social groups fostered loyalty and cooperation, enabling the empire to function effectively despite its heterogeneous composition. The Huns' ability to balance nomadic traditions with sedentary administrative demands reflects a sophisticated understanding of governance and cultural diplomacy, ensuring the endurance of their political structures during periods of expansion. Education, craftsmanship, and technological knowledge also diffused under Hunnic rule. The Huns facilitated the movement of artisans and skilled laborers, who contributed to construction, metallurgy, and artistic production across the empire. Evidence from architectural remains, ceramics, and fortifications indicates the application of both indigenous techniques and innovations adapted from conquered regions. By fostering the circulation of skills and knowledge, the Huns strengthened economic productivity and cultural coherence, reinforcing the structural foundations of their empire. This exchange of expertise illustrates that Hunnic cultural development was dynamic, involving both preservation of traditional practices and the adoption of new methods in response to environmental and political contexts. The cultural interactions and adaptations of the White Huns had lasting consequences for the regions under their influence. By integrating religious, artistic, and administrative practices from surrounding civilizations, they facilitated the dissemination of ideas and technologies across Central Asia and northern India. Archaeological and numismatic evidence confirms that these interactions contributed to the formation of hybrid cultural forms, which influenced subsequent regional powers and artistic traditions. The Huns' capacity to adapt culturally while maintaining political cohesion illustrates the centrality of cultural strategy in sustaining a nomadic empire within complex, multi-ethnic territories. In sum, the cultural development of the White Huns reflects a deliberate and adaptive approach to governance, social integration, and artistic expression. Their engagement with local religions, artistic motifs, economic networks, and linguistic conventions allowed them to consolidate authority and facilitate cultural exchange across diverse populations. These practices reinforced both political stability and societal cohesion, enabling the Huns to expand effectively while leaving enduring cultural legacies. The synthesis of steppe traditions with the influences of India, Persia, and Central Asia exemplifies the broader principle that nomadic empires could shape and be shaped by the civilizations they encountered, creating enduring patterns of cultural transmission that persisted beyond their political dominance. This foundation of cultural and social adaptation set the stage for the White Huns' military campaigns, territorial expansion, and eventual peak as a multi-regional power. The expansion of the White Huns into northern India represents one of the most consequential phases of their history, combining military strategy, political ambition, and cultural negotiation. By the late 5th century, the Huns, under leaders such as Toramana, had moved beyond the steppes and the regions of Afghanistan into the fertile plains of the Indian subcontinent. Archaeological evidence, including fortifications, urban settlements, and coin hoards, indicates a systematic approach to conquest and occupation. The initial incursions targeted strategically significant regions, such as the Punjab and the western Gangetic Plains, where control over trade routes and urban centers provided both wealth and political leverage. These campaigns were not merely raids, but organized military operations designed to integrate conquered territories into the Hunnic sphere of influence, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of both strategy and governance. Military tactics were central to the Huns' success in India. The Huns employed highly mobile cavalry units equipped with composite bows and sabers, enabling rapid attacks and strategic maneuvering across diverse terrain. Contemporary Indian sources describe coordinated assaults on fortified towns and the use of psychological warfare to disrupt enemy morale. Archaeological findings of defensive structures and weapon caches confirm that the Huns also adopted siege techniques and utilized locally recruited infantry to supplement their cavalry forces. This integration of nomadic mobility with sedentary military practices allowed the Huns to project power over extended distances, overcome regional armies, and maintain control over newly conquered territories. Their campaigns illustrate the interplay between tactical innovation and administrative foresight in achieving sustained expansion. Political strategy complemented military operations. The White Huns established administrative oversight in occupied regions by appointing governors and co-opting local elites into their governance framework. Inscriptions from northern India reveal arrangements wherein regional kings and landholders retained certain privileges in exchange for tribute and loyalty to Hunnic authority. This pragmatic approach minimized resistance and enabled efficient collection of resources necessary for maintaining both military forces and administrative infrastructure. By combining coercion with negotiation, the Huns created a system that integrated local governance with imperial oversight, reflecting an understanding of the social and political complexities of controlling a diverse population. This dual strategy of military and administrative coordination allowed for sustainable territorial expansion. Economic considerations were integral to the Huns' strategy in India. Control over key trade routes linking the northwest to the Gangetic Plains provided access to goods such as textiles, metals, and agricultural surplus. Coinage minted under Hunnic rulers demonstrates both economic integration and symbolic assertion of authority, often featuring bilingual inscriptions to communicate legitimacy to local populations. Tribute from urban centers and agricultural regions supplemented resources gained from trade, supporting the logistical demands of military campaigns and administrative structures. The economic networks established under Hunnic control facilitated not only revenue generation, but also the movement of artisans, religious figures, and technological knowledge, illustrating the interconnectedness of commerce, culture, and political authority in sustaining empire. Religious and cultural engagement further reinforced Hunnic influence. While leaders such as Toramana and Mihirakula are often noted in Indian chronicles for their military campaigns, archaeological evidence indicates that the Huns also interacted with religious institutions, including Buddhist monasteries and Hindu temples. In some regions, they provided patronage or allowed local religious practices to continue under Hunnic oversight, integrating spiritual authority into their governance framework. This pragmatic accommodation enhanced legitimacy, reduced social disruption, and facilitated cooperation from conquered populations. Artistic motifs in coinage and fortifications reflect a blend of steppe, Gupta, and regional styles, suggesting deliberate efforts to respect and incorporate local cultural norms while asserting Hunnic authority. The impact of Hunnic expansion on the Indian subcontinent was profound. The disruption of Gupta political structures, the establishment of tributary arrangements, and the integration of Hunnic administrative practices altered regional power dynamics. Local kingdoms adapted to the presence of a new imperial authority, modifying their own governance and military strategies in response. Numismatic and inscriptional evidence shows that urban centers under Hunnic control maintained economic activity, suggesting that conquest did not entirely disrupt regional economies, but rather redirected resources toward the Hunnic administrative framework. These developments illustrate that the expansion was as much about sustained governance and resource management as it was about conquest, reflecting a nuanced approach to empire building. The Huns' campaigns in India also had long-term implications for cultural and political synthesis. By establishing control over key regions, they facilitated the movement of people, goods, and ideas across northern India and into Central Asia. Artistic, religious, and administrative practices were transmitted through these interactions, contributing to the evolution of hybrid forms that persisted after Hunnic political power waned. This period of expansion demonstrates that military conquest, when combined with effective administration and cultural accommodation, could have enduring effects on regional history. The Huns' ability to integrate conquered territories into a coherent imperial framework set a model for subsequent nomadic and regional powers in South Asia. By the end of this expansion phase, the White Huns had transformed from a steppe-based confederation into a multi-regional power with extensive influence over northern India. Their success relied on the interplay of military innovation, administrative strategy, economic integration, and cultural engagement. Conquest was complemented by pragmatic governance, ensuring the durability of Hunnic authority across diverse populations. The lessons of this period, coordination between mobility and administration, incorporation of local elites, and respect for cultural practices, would define the empire's capacity for governance and influence during its peak. This stage of expansion directly prepared the Huns for both consolidation of their Indian territories and simultaneous interactions with neighboring powers in Persia and Central Asia, demonstrating the interconnected nature of military, political, and cultural strategy. The expansion into northern India thus represents a critical phase in the White Huns' historical trajectory. It illustrates the transformation of a mobile, nomadic confederation into an imperial force capable of sustained territorial control and integration of diverse populations. By successfully combining military prowess, administrative structures, economic strategy, and cultural engagement, the Huns established the foundations for their peak territorial extent and influence. This period highlights the capacity of nomadic empires to project power, manage complex societies, and leave enduring legacies across conquered regions. The strategies and structures developed during this expansion would underpin the Huns' governance, diplomacy, and societal influence in subsequent decades, setting the stage for their interactions with neighboring powers and the consolidation of a multi-regional empire. The military campaigns of the White Huns during the early 6th century represent a defining feature of their historical impact, demonstrating the strategic application of mobility, discipline, and adaptive warfare. Following their consolidation in Central Asia and expansion into northern India, the Huns under leaders such as Toramana and Mihirakula conducted sustained operations aimed at both territorial acquisition and political dominance. Contemporary inscriptions, Chinese chronicles, and Indian literary sources document their engagements with regional powers, including the declining Gupta Empire, the Matrakas of western India, and various local chieftains in the Punjab and Gangetic plains. Archaeological evidence, including fortifications, weapon caches, and equestrian equipment, reveals the sophistication of Hunnic military organization and the deliberate planning that underpinned these campaigns. These operations were not merely raids, but comprehensive strategies integrating logistics, intelligence, and coordination across diverse terrain and populations. Hunnic forces relied heavily on highly mobile cavalry, equipped with composite bows, spears, and sabers, which allowed rapid maneuvers and the ability to exploit weaknesses in enemy formations. The use of mounted archery, feigned retreats, and encirclement tactics provided significant advantages over traditional infantry-based armies of sedentary states. Archaeological findings from northern India and Central Asia indicate the deployment of reinforced cavalry units alongside locally recruited infantry, demonstrating a flexible approach to combining nomadic and sedentary military practices. This hybrid model enabled the Huns to adapt to different battlefield environments, whether open steppe, riverine plains, or fortified urban centers. Their operational versatility illustrates a sophisticated understanding of combined arms warfare, mobility, and psychological strategy. Strategic planning was further evident in the Huns' logistical management. Military campaigns required the coordination of supply lines, forage for horses, and the transportation of siege equipment and plundered goods. Semi-permanent encampments and fortified positions along critical trade routes facilitated operational endurance, while seasonal movements optimized resource availability. Numismatic and archaeological evidence indicates that the Huns established control over key economic centers, ensuring access to provisions, tribute, and reinforcements. This logistical foresight allowed Hunnic armies to sustain prolonged campaigns far from their steppe homelands, a critical factor in their capacity to project power into northern India and adjacent regions. The campaigns of Mihirakula illustrate both the reach and the consequences of Hunnic military strategy. Sources describe the systematic subjugation of urban centers, the enforcement of tribute payments, and the destruction of fortified settlements resistant to Hunnic authority. Archaeological records corroborate these accounts, revealing evidence of urban disruption, fortification damage, and material culture indicative of Hunnic presence. These operations, while demonstrating military dominance, also necessitated subsequent administrative efforts to stabilize newly conquered regions. The integration of local elites and the continuation of economic and religious activities under Hunnic supervision highlight the dual strategy of coercion and accommodation, emphasizing that military success alone was insufficient for lasting influence. The Huns' military engagements were not limited to India. Incursions into Persia and Central Asia were equally significant. Contemporary Persian sources, including Sassanid chronicles, describe repeated Hunnic attacks into Khorasan and the eastern Iranian plateau, challenging the authority of the Sassanid Empire. These campaigns forced the Sassanids to implement strategic defensive reforms, including fortified garrisons, improved logistics, and rapid response units, reflecting the broader impact of Hunnic military practice on regional warfare. By compelling sedentary empires to adapt to mobile and flexible adversaries, the Huns influenced the evolution of military strategy across Eurasia, demonstrating that nomadic tactics could redefine conventional approaches to defense and territorial control. Leadership and coordination were central to the effectiveness of Hunnic military operations. Command structures balanced centralized decision-making with delegated authority to regional commanders, often drawn from clan elites, ensuring both loyalty and operational flexibility. The ability to mobilize dispersed forces rapidly, coordinate attacks across multiple fronts, and integrate local auxiliary units demonstrates a level of strategic sophistication uncommon among contemporary nomadic societies. Archaeological evidence, including standardized weaponry and equestrian equipment, supports textual accounts of disciplined, organized forces capable of sustained campaigns. This organizational framework underpinned the Huns' capacity to maintain both offensive momentum and administrative oversight in conquered territories. The broader consequences of Hunnic military campaigns extended beyond immediate territorial gains. By destabilizing regional powers such as the Gupta Empire, the Huns altered political dynamics, creating opportunities for both consolidation and cultural integration. Urban centers subjected to Hunnic campaigns often continued economic activity under new governance structures, facilitating the spread of Hunnic administrative practices and cultural influence. The integration of military conquest with governance, economic management, and cultural negotiation exemplifies a holistic approach to empire building, demonstrating that the Huns' impact was both destructive and constructive in shaping regional trajectories. The campaigns also had significant long-term implications for the evolution of warfare in South and Central Asia. Sedentary states learned to adapt to the mobility, archery, and strategic flexibility characteristic of Hunnic forces, incorporating similar tactics into their own military doctrines. This diffusion of military innovation underscores the Huns' role as catalysts for change, influencing not only immediate political outcomes, but also the broader evolution of warfare in the region. The lessons of mobility, logistics, and coordination would resonate in the strategies of later nomadic empires, including the Ghaznavids and Mongols, highlighting the enduring impact of Hunnic military practices. By the conclusion of this phase, the Huns had established themselves as a formidable military power capable of projecting authority across vast territories. Their campaigns demonstrate the interplay between mobility, organization, logistics, and strategic foresight, illustrating how a nomadic confederation could achieve sustained territorial influence. The combination of martial prowess and administrative coordination enabled the Huns to maintain control over diverse populations, extract resources effectively, and integrate cultural and economic practices into their imperial framework. This period of military consolidation set the stage for both the eventual fragmentation of the Hunnic Empire and the enduring influence of their strategies on regional history. The military operations of the White Huns thus exemplify the centrality of organized warfare in establishing and sustaining imperial power. By integrating cavalry mobility, combined arms tactics, logistical planning, and adaptive leadership, the Huns achieved sustained conquest while simultaneously enabling administrative and cultural integration. These campaigns shaped regional politics, influenced the evolution of military strategies, and established patterns of governance and resource management that would inform the Huns' legacy. The lessons of this period, in both success and limitation, directly connect to subsequent political instability, internal strife, and the eventual decline of the empire, demonstrating the inseparable relationship between military strategy and the long-term trajectory of imperial power. The decline of the White Huns represents a critical phase in their historical trajectory, illustrating the vulnerabilities inherent in nomadic empires that had expanded rapidly across diverse regions. By the mid-6th century, the Huns faced both internal and external pressures that eroded their cohesion and undermined their capacity to maintain centralized authority. Contemporary sources, including Indian inscriptions, Chinese chronicles, and Persian accounts, document a combination of succession disputes, military setbacks, and resistance from local populations. Archaeological evidence, such as abandoned fortifications, disrupted settlement patterns, and declining coinage production, corroborates these narratives, indicating that the empire was experiencing both administrative and territorial contraction. These developments highlight the complex interplay between internal governance, military sustainability, and external political dynamics in determining the longevity of nomadic empires. Internal divisions among Hunnic leadership were a primary factor in the empire's decline. Following the death of strong rulers such as Toramana, competing claims to authority among clan leaders created fragmentation. Leadership disputes disrupted the coordination of military campaigns, weakened administrative oversight, and undermined the collection of tribute from conquered territories. Inscriptions and historical records indicate that regional governors and local elites increasingly acted independently, exploiting central weakness to assert autonomy. This decentralization diminished the ability of the Huns to respond effectively to external threats and maintain cohesion across geographically distant regions. The experience illustrates that even militarily powerful nomadic empires were susceptible to internal instability when succession mechanisms and centralized authority were not firmly institutionalized. External pressures compounded the effects of internal division. The resurgence of regional powers, including the post-Gupta Indian kingdoms, the Matrakas, and the emerging Rajput polities, challenged Hunnic authority and reclaimed territories previously under imperial control. In Persia, the Sassanid Empire, having reorganized its defenses and military infrastructure, resisted incursions more effectively. Contemporary chronicles describe coordinated counteroffensives, fortified city defenses, and diplomatic measures designed to isolate Hunnic forces. Archaeological findings, including evidence of fortified settlements and destroyed Hunnic garrisons, support the narrative of sustained military pressure from both local and regional adversaries. The combination of internal fragmentation and external opposition accelerated the erosion of Hunnic political power. Economic factors also contributed to decline. Tribute collection and taxation, which had sustained the Hunnic administrative and military apparatus, became increasingly difficult as local populations resisted imperial authority. Disruptions in trade networks, both due to military conflicts and internal instability, reduced access to critical resources, including horses, food supplies, and currency. Numismatic studies indicate a decline in coinage production and circulation, reflecting both fiscal contraction and diminishing imperial influence. The interplay between economic decline and political fragmentation underscores the dependence of nomadic empires on sustained control of both territory and resources, and highlights the vulnerabilities that arise when these systems are disrupted. The social and cultural consequences of decline were significant. As Hunnic authority weakened, local populations reasserted traditional practices and governance structures. Archaeological evidence shows the abandonment of certain Hunnic fortifications and administrative centers, while temples, urban centers, and trade hubs returned to indigenous control. Religious and cultural institutions, previously integrated into the Hunnic administrative framework, resumed autonomous operations, often reshaping local societal norms and reinforcing pre-existing traditions. The decline phase illustrates that the disintegration of political authority inevitably affected social organization, demonstrating the interdependence of governance, military control, and cultural integration in maintaining imperial cohesion. Military overstretch also played a role in the Huns' contraction. Sustaining campaigns across vast and geographically diverse territories placed considerable strain on leadership, logistics, and operational effectiveness. Seasonal movements, supply lines, and coordination of dispersed forces became increasingly difficult amid internal disputes and external opposition. Archaeological evidence of destroyed or abandoned outposts reflects the inability to maintain control over extended frontiers. The challenges of projecting power over distant regions, combined with declining centralized authority, underscore a structural limitation of nomadic empires reliant on mobility and rapid deployment for strategic advantage. The decline of the White Huns was not abrupt but occurred over several decades, reflecting a gradual unraveling of political, economic, and military cohesion. Regional powers progressively reclaimed territories, diminishing the Huns' capacity to enforce tribute and maintain administrative oversight. Cultural integration initiatives, while effective during periods of strong governance, could not withstand the pressures of internal division and external resistance. By the end of the 6th century, the Hunnic Confederation had largely fragmented, with surviving groups either assimilated into local populations or retreating toward Central Asia. This process illustrates the dynamic interplay between expansion, consolidation, and decline, highlighting the limits of nomadic empires in sustaining long-term territorial dominance without institutionalized succession and administrative structures. The consequences of decline also influenced the broader historical landscape. The withdrawal of Hunnic authority allowed regional polities to consolidate power, contributing to the emergence of the Rajput states and the stabilization of Indian political structures. In Central Asia and Persia, Hunnic retreat reshaped power balances, facilitating the rise of successor nomadic groups and the reassertion of Sassanid influence. The experience of decline provides insights into the structural vulnerabilities of nomadic empires, particularly the challenges of integrating sedentary populations, sustaining economic systems, and maintaining centralized authority across extensive and heterogeneous territories. In conclusion, the decline of the White Huns exemplifies the interaction of internal instability, external opposition, economic contraction, and military overstretch in the life cycle of nomadic empires. Leadership disputes, diminishing control over tribute and trade, and renewed resistance from regional powers combined to erode the cohesion of the Hunnic state. Archaeological and textual evidence confirms a gradual but inexorable reduction of Hunnic influence across northern India, Central Asia, and Persia. The lessons of this period underscore the fragility of empires dependent on mobility, personal authority, and rapid military campaigns, while demonstrating that even highly adaptive and militarily capable societies are subject to structural constraints that ultimately shape their historical trajectory. The decline phase directly set the stage for the subsequent legacy and cultural influence of the White Huns, which persisted long after their political dominance had ended. The legacy of the White Huns demonstrates the enduring impact of a nomadic empire that, despite its relatively brief period of political dominance, shaped the political, cultural, and military landscape of Central and South Asia. By the late 6th century, following the decline of centralized Hunnic authority, their influence persisted through the social, administrative, and cultural structures they had established. Archaeological evidence, inscriptions, and numismatic records indicate that the Huns left an imprint on governance models, military organization, urban administration, and cultural exchange, influencing both successor states and regional societies. The White Huns' capacity to integrate local elites, sustain economic networks, and adapt religious and artistic traditions ensured that their legacy extended far beyond the immediate period of Hunnic rule, shaping patterns of imperial interaction and cultural diffusion for generations. One of the most significant aspects of Hunnic legacy was their influence on political structures in northern India. The Huns introduced administrative practices, such as semi-centralized governance, tribute collection, and the incorporation of local elites into ruling hierarchies that persisted in subsequent Indian polities. Inscriptions from post-Hunnic periods reflect continuity in fiscal and military administration, particularly in regions formerly under Hunnic control. By demonstrating the effectiveness of combining mobile military authority with local governance frameworks, the Huns provided a model that influenced later dynasties, including the Rajputs and regional kingdoms of Western India. The integration of steppe organizational principles with settled administrative practices illustrates how nomadic empires could contribute enduring innovations to sedentary statecraft. Culturally, the Huns facilitated the transmission of artistic, religious, and technological traditions across Central and South Asia. Coins, sculptures, and architectural motifs from Hunnic regions display a blend of steppe, Gupta, and Sassanid influences, demonstrating an early example of syncretism resulting from imperial expansion. The patronage of religious institutions, including Buddhist monasteries and Hindu temples, created networks for cultural exchange that outlasted political control. Archaeological sites in northern India and Afghanistan reveal Hunnic engagement with local artisans and urban centers, fostering hybrid artistic and architectural forms. These interactions contributed to the diffusion of steppe motifs, equestrian imagery, and military iconography, influencing regional visual culture and material practices well beyond the period of Hunnic rule. The military legacy of the White Huns was similarly profound. Their emphasis on highly mobile cavalry, coordinated attacks, and combined arms operations influenced subsequent nomadic and regional powers across Eurasia. Strategies developed by the Huns, including rapid deployment, mounted archery, and the integration of local infantry, provided a framework for future military innovations among Central Asian and Indian polities. Sassanid responses to Hunnic incursions, including fortified garrisons and rapid response units, demonstrate the broader regional impact of Hunnic military practices. By demonstrating the effectiveness of mobility, tactical flexibility, and logistical planning, the Huns contributed to a legacy of strategic adaptation that informed later empires, including the Ghaznavids and eventually the Mongols. Economic and trade influences of the Huns also persisted after their decline. By controlling key routes connecting Central Asia, Persia, and northern India, the Huns integrated regions into broader commercial networks, facilitating the movement of goods, people, and ideas. Archaeological evidence of caravanserais, coin circulation, and trade-related infrastructure highlights the enduring economic footprint of Hunnic administration. Successor states benefited from these networks, which facilitated taxation, resource mobilization, and cultural exchange. The Huns' ability to combine military conquest with economic integration ensured that their impact extended beyond immediate political control, shaping regional patterns of commerce for decades. The legacy of the Huns is also evident in social and demographic transformations. Their incursions, settlement patterns, and integration of local populations contributed to population movement, urbanization, and the reorganization of social hierarchies. In regions such as the Punjab and Western Gangetic Plains, the Huns' presence altered the distribution of political authority, reshaped local governance structures, and influenced the composition of urban and rural populations. Archaeological and inscriptional evidence indicates that the Huns' interactions with local elites, artisans, and religious figures left enduring social patterns, which were adapted by successor dynasties to consolidate power and maintain regional cohesion. Religious and cultural interactions under Hunnic rule left a lasting imprint on the development of regional traditions. By patronizing local religious institutions while maintaining steppe spiritual practices, the Huns facilitated dialogue between nomadic and settled belief systems. This cultural exchange influenced subsequent artistic expression, architectural design, and ritual practice. Monasteries, temples, and urban centers formerly under Hunnic influence continued to function as hubs of knowledge, commerce, and culture, illustrating the enduring effects of the Huns' adaptive approach to governance and social integration. The legacy of cultural pluralism established under Hunnic rule provided a model for future empires navigating ethnically and religiously diverse territories. In assessing the broader significance of the Huns' legacy, it becomes evident that their influence extended beyond the immediate geopolitical consequences of conquest. Their integration of nomadic mobility with administrative and economic structures demonstrated the viability of hybrid governance models. Their military innovations reshaped regional warfare and informed defensive strategies among sedentary states. Their cultural engagement fostered artistic, religious, and technological exchange across Central and South Asia. By bridging the steppe and settled worlds, the Huns contributed to patterns of cultural synthesis, economic integration, and political organization that persisted long after the dissolution of centralized Hunnic authority. Ultimately, the White Huns' legacy illustrates the multidimensional impact of nomadic empires on settled civilizations. While their political dominance was temporary, their influence on governance, military strategy, trade, cultural exchange, and social organization endured across subsequent centuries. Archaeological, numismatic, and textual evidence confirms that their presence shaped the development of northern India, Central Asia, and adjacent regions, leaving a lasting imprint on political, cultural, and military practices. The White Huns exemplify how a mobile, militarily adept society could create enduring structures and influence far beyond the duration of their empire, bridging the worlds of nomadic steppe and sedentary civilization in ways that continued to resonate in regional history. Their legacy, both tangible and conceptual, provides a lens through which historians can understand the complex interplay of mobility, governance, and cultural adaptation in the formation of early medieval empires. The interactions of the White Huns with neighboring empires and polities constitute a significant phase in understanding their historical influence and strategic diplomacy. Throughout their expansion and consolidation, the Huns engaged with a variety of contemporary powers, including the Gupta Empire in northern India, the Sassanid Empire in Persia, and the remnants of Central Asian states such as the Hephthalites and Sogdian principalities. These interactions encompassed warfare, diplomacy, trade, and cultural exchange, illustrating the Huns' capacity not only for military conquest, but also for strategic negotiation and adaptation to complex political environments. Archaeological evidence, inscriptions, and numismatic records provide insight into the nature of these relationships, revealing both cooperation and conflict as mechanisms through which the Huns exercised influence across a vast and diverse region. The relationship with the declining Gupta Empire exemplifies the Huns' approach to external political engagement. Inscriptions and Indian chronicles document repeated Hunnic incursions into Gupta territories under Toramana and Mihirakula, targeting strategic urban centers, trade routes, and fortified settlements. These campaigns significantly weakened Gupta authority, resulting in tributary arrangements and the temporary establishment of Hunnic administration in parts of the Gangetic Plains. Numismatic evidence indicates that coinage from this period often incorporated both Gupta and Hunnic motifs, reflecting the complex interplay of dominance, legitimacy, and cultural accommodation. By negotiating with Gupta elites, the Huns were able to extract resources and maintain influence without necessarily imposing direct governance across all conquered areas, demonstrating a pragmatic approach to empire building that balanced coercion with diplomacy. The Huns' interactions with the Sassanid Empire in Persia were similarly strategic, reflecting the challenges of projecting power across international boundaries. Contemporary Persian sources describe repeated Hunnic raids into eastern provinces such as Khorasan, prompting defensive reforms including the construction of fortified garrisons and mobilization of rapid response cavalry units. Archaeological findings, including destroyed outposts and disrupted settlement patterns, corroborate accounts of sustained Hunnic pressure. These engagements illustrate the dual nature of Hunnic diplomacy and warfare. While direct conquest was limited in Persian territory, the threat posed by the Huns forced neighboring states to adapt their military, administrative, and diplomatic strategies. This dynamic underscores the broader regional impact of Hunnic mobility and military innovation, influencing both strategic planning and defensive architecture. Trade and economic interaction played a central role in the Huns' engagement with neighboring polities. Controlling key points along routes connecting Central Asia, Persia, and northern India allowed the Huns to regulate commerce, extract tribute, and facilitate cultural exchange. Archaeological evidence of caravanserais, coin hoards, and trade infrastructure highlights the Huns' capacity to integrate local economies into a broader imperial framework. Diplomatic agreements with neighboring states often included arrangements for secure passage of merchants, standardized taxation, and coordinated management of urban centers. By leveraging economic influence alongside military capability, the Huns strengthened their regional authority and created lasting channels of interaction that outlived their political dominance. Religious and cultural diplomacy also characterized Hunnic relations with neighboring powers. The Huns engaged with Buddhist, Hindu, and Zoroastrian institutions, balancing respect for local practices with the assertion of imperial authority. In regions influenced by the Guptas, the Huns allowed the continuation of religious endowments and urban rituals, while in Central Asia, interactions with Sogdian and Persian populations facilitated artistic and cultural exchange. Coinage, inscriptions, and architectural motifs reveal hybrid forms that communicated both Hunnic power and local cultural identity. These strategies reinforced legitimacy, facilitated cooperation, and mitigated resistance, demonstrating that Hunnic influence extended beyond coercion to include cultural integration and symbolic diplomacy. The Huns' interactions also shaped regional power dynamics in ways that persisted after their political decline. By destabilizing established empires, redirecting trade networks, and introducing new administrative and military practices, the Huns created conditions for the emergence of successor states. In northern India, The weakening of Gupta authority allowed regional polities such as the Matrakas, later Rajput states, and emerging kingdoms to consolidate power while incorporating Hunnic administrative practices. In Central Asia and Persia, defensive adaptations to Hunnic raids influenced subsequent military strategies and settlement patterns. The Huns' engagement with neighbors thus left enduring structural and strategic legacies that extended beyond immediate territorial conquest. The nature of Hunnic diplomacy and warfare demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of the interplay between coercion, negotiation, and cultural engagement. Leaders like Toramana and Mihirakula combined military action with strategic alliances, tribute arrangements, and cultural accommodation to achieve political objectives. Inscriptions and historical texts indicate that the Huns were able to balance direct military intervention with indirect influence, ensuring resource extraction and political compliance without necessitating permanent occupation in all regions. This hybrid approach to foreign relations illustrates the adaptability of nomadic empires in managing interactions with more sedentary and territorially established states. By the end of this phase, the Huns had established a network of influence across northern India, Central Asia, and the eastern frontiers of Persia, demonstrating the strategic integration of military, economic, and cultural tools in interstate relations. Their engagements with neighboring empires reflect both the opportunities and limits of nomadic power. While mobility and military prowess enabled rapid expansion and coercion, enduring influence required negotiation, adaptation, and the incorporation of local structures into broader imperial strategies. Archaeological, numismatic, and textual evidence collectively highlight the multifaceted nature of Hunnic interaction with surrounding polities, offering insight into the mechanisms by which nomadic empires exerted and maintained influence over complex, heterogeneous regions. In conclusion, the White Huns' interactions with neighboring empires illustrate the centrality of strategic diplomacy, military innovation, economic integration, and cultural negotiation in sustaining nomadic influence. By combining raids with tribute systems, military deterrence with alliances, and cultural accommodation with administrative oversight, the Huns extended their impact beyond territorial conquest. These engagements reshaped regional politics, influenced military and economic practices, and facilitated the diffusion of artistic and cultural forms across Central and South Asia. The Huns' legacy in interstate relations provides a critical perspective on how nomadic empires could both challenge and transform the political, economic, and cultural landscapes of their time, bridging the steppe and settled worlds in ways that continued to resonate long after their political decline. The historical significance of the White Huns emerges most clearly in their enduring influence on the political, cultural, and social landscapes of Central and South Asia. While their period of direct political dominance was relatively brief, spanning roughly the 5th and 6th centuries CE, the consequences of their expansion, administration, and cultural engagement extended far beyond their immediate control. By examining archaeological, numismatic, inscriptional, and textual evidence, it becomes apparent that the Huns contributed to patterns of governance, military innovation, cultural exchange, and regional integration that shaped subsequent empires and societies. Their trajectory, from steppe nomads to rulers of multi-regional territories, offers insight into the mechanisms through which nomadic societies could assert lasting influence over complex, sedentary civilizations. One of the most profound aspects of the Huns' historical impact was their role in the transformation of northern India's political landscape. The Huns, under leaders such as Toramana and Mihirakula, disrupted the declining Gupta Empire, forcing its successor states to adapt to new political realities. By introducing administrative structures that integrated local elites, regulated tribute, and coordinated military oversight, the Huns left an enduring blueprint for governance. Numismatic evidence demonstrates continuity in coinage practices and monetary circulation, while inscriptions reveal that subsequent rulers retained Hunnic administrative frameworks for tax collection, legal adjudication, and regional oversight. The Huns' capacity to blend nomadic leadership with the administrative sophistication of conquered regions established a precedent for the hybrid governance models later adopted by Indian dynasties, illustrating the long-term consequences of their political interventions. In military terms, the White Huns' innovations influenced both contemporary and later forces. Their emphasis on highly mobile cavalry, combined arms tactics, and strategic coordination across diverse terrains provided a template for nomadic and sedentary armies alike. Sedentary states, such as the post-Gupta kingdoms and the Sassanid Empire, adapted defensive strategies to counter Hunnic incursions, including fortified garrisons, rapid response cavalry units, and improved logistics. The tactical lessons of mobility, flexibility, and psychological strategy disseminated by the Huns persisted in the military doctrines of subsequent Central Asian and South Asian powers. In this regard, the Huns served as a catalyst for the evolution of warfare, demonstrating that even relatively short-lived nomadic empires could have durable influence on strategic thought and military organization. Cultural and religious exchanges facilitated by the Huns constitute another enduring element of their legacy. Through patronage of Buddhist monasteries, Hindu temples, and local artisan communities, Hunnic rulers contributed to the transmission and synthesis of artistic, architectural, and spiritual traditions. Archaeological evidence reveals hybridized motifs in sculpture, reliefs, and coins that combine steppe symbolism with Gupta, Sassanid, and regional Indian styles. These cultural interactions fostered cross-regional dialogue, enabling the movement of artisans, religious scholars, and commercial expertise. By integrating cultural accommodation with political authority, the Huns created networks of exchange that outlasted their political control, influencing artistic, religious, and social developments in the centuries that followed. Economically, the Huns played a role in shaping trade networks that connected Central Asia, Persia, and northern India. Their control over key trade routes, combined with strategic fortifications and semi-permanent settlements, facilitated the movement of goods, people, and information. Archaeological evidence, including caravanserais, coin hoards, and trade-related infrastructure, highlights the Huns' role in maintaining and securing these commercial pathways. These networks not only generated wealth for the empire during its peak, but also laid the foundation for subsequent economic integration in the region. By linking steppe and sedentary economies, the Huns contributed to a pattern of Eurasian exchange that had long-term implications for regional commerce and urban development. The social ramifications of Hunnic rule further illustrate their lasting impact. The integration of nomadic elites with local aristocracies, the accommodation of diverse populations, and the establishment of administrative and military hierarchies influenced social organization in regions under Hunnic control. Post-Hunnic states, including the Rajput polities and regional kingdoms in western India, adopted aspects of these social structures, particularly in managing multi-ethnic populations and coordinating military obligations. The Huns' experience demonstrates that nomadic empires could exert influence not only through conquest, but through the creation of adaptable social frameworks capable of sustaining governance across heterogeneous populations. Finally, the historiographical and analytical significance of the White Huns extends to the study of nomadic sedentary interactions more broadly. By bridging steppe mobility with the administrative sophistication of urban societies, the Huns exemplify the dynamics through which nomadic groups could shape and be shaped by the civilizations they encountered. Their history highlights patterns of expansion, governance, cultural negotiation, and integration that are critical for understanding the evolution of early medieval Eurasian polities. The White Huns' trajectory underscores the importance of mobility, adaptability, and strategic vision in determining the long-term consequences of empire building, even for societies whose political dominance was temporally limited. In conclusion, the White Huns' historical significance lies in their multifaceted legacy as political disruptors, military innovators, cultural intermediaries, and economic integrators. By establishing administrative structures, influencing military strategy, fostering cultural exchange, and sustaining trade networks, the Huns shaped the trajectory of Central and South Asian societies long after the decline of their centralized authority. Archaeological, numismatic, and textual evidence collectively confirm that the White Huns' impact was both profound and enduring, illustrating how nomadic empires could exert influence far beyond their period of direct rule. Their history provides a model for understanding the complexities of empire, mobility, and cultural adaptation, demonstrating that even temporary dominion could leave lasting marks on political structures, societal organization, and regional development. The White Huns remain a critical case study in the broader narrative of Eurasian history, bridging steppe and settled worlds in ways that reshaped the course of the early medieval period.